Welcome back, everyone. This is the Patriot Outlaws broadcasting worldwide, February 29, 2020. As you know, for the last 3 weeks, we've had Gunner on here doing his special Operation Highjump. We've went through part 1, the origin, fakes, and myths. Part 2, battles of Antarctica. Part 3 was the real Operation Highjump, where we got into some of the details and some of the debunking of some of the theories out there that's going on tonight. We're going to review this thing and go through some of the questions that you guys out there on the chat. We've noticed there's been a lot of conversation out there and a lot of back and forth with Gunner, and he's more than happy to field some of these questions and some of the ones that I've asked over the last couple of weeks as well. Gunner, sir, I hope you're there with us. How you doing?
I'm here, Mac. I'm good. How are you?
Doing good, man. Doing fine. I'm looking forward tonight to getting this last piece of the puzzle together. You've given us a great presentation so far on this, and I'm certain that this one will live up to expectation as well. Let's get right to it, man. What are we going to get to tonight? I'm very curious.
Well, I was really surprised that I had quite a few questions, not necessarily comments, just questions, and had a few conversations in the chat with people that had questions, and people were asking about Admiral Byrd being funded by John Rockefeller Jr. And this Masonic Lodge, whatever, in Antarctica, and Nazi maps, and there's just 6 or 7 things, but I don't have to go in any detail, but they're pretty easy to answer, so we should go pretty quick.
Oh, okay. Well, we're in no rush. I'm really curious. A lot of that stuff there as well gets, I've had some conversations with you. I think the J.D. Rockefeller stuff and the Antarctic and the Lodge and the Masonic connections always kind of bother me and kind of fit into the narrative of the elites hiding, whatever, the hollow earth, the flat earth, or the secret Nazi technology that was down there. It kind of made it all kind of cohesive. It was kind of the glue that held all those together. But as you presented last week, I think one of the most compelling pieces of this was the public nature of this event, and the number of people that were not only aware, but that were watching it, kind of like the moon landing, so to speak. But I'll let you get to it. No more interruptions for me.
Yeah, and when these conspiracy groups and these conspiracy theories, they like I said, they build on this thing. They build on Ernst Zundel and his books in the mid to late 70s about all this. And so, you had a period of time where everything seemed to just stop and nobody was really interested in it. And then comes the flat earthers and hollow earthers, and it's just ballooned into this thing that has little or no truth to it whatsoever. I mean, it has pieces of truth that people use, to bolster their own credibility. But in the end, if you really break this down, most of it's totally false, So I think we'll start out with the Rockefeller support.
Okay.
When he was going to make his first flight to the Arctic over the North Pole, he was trying to in 1925, but until then he made no really big achievements, and he was trying to secure funding from well-known people such as John D. Rockefeller and Henry Ford and Edsel Ford, Ford's son, and he also convinced some media outlets such as the New York Times and CBS to help fund this flight in exchange for their news coverage. And on May 9th, 1926, Byrd flew this Fokker F-7, and he named it Josephine Ford, and that should be a hint to a lot of people, because if they look up Josephine Ford, they would find that this is the daughter of Edsel Ford, and that flight was funded by Edsel Ford, and Byrd named the aircraft after Ford's daughter.
Okay.
And so, but his next attempt was to fly nonstop across the Atlantic, and there was a test flight, and his fellow pilot was killed in a crash on 20 April 1927. And then he had these first Antarctic expeditions, and of course you're talking about this starting in 1928. And you have to remember that this was the beginning of the Great Depression. You know, they had the stock market crash in 29, right?
Yep.
And you're going through the early to mid-30s. It was a terrible time for this country.
Yeah.
You know, and so in order to finance, these expeditions, he had to gain political support and public support. I can't see really how he would have gotten much money from the general public. So Byrd actively cultivated relationships with people like FDR, Henry Ford, Edsel Ford, and John D. Rockefeller Jr., and Vincent Astor. And as a token of his gratitude, Byrd would name these geographic features in the Antarctic after his supporters, like the Rockefeller Mountains was one of them. He even gave Rockefeller a stuffed emperor penguin as a gift, for his financial support. And he named Marie Birdland after his wife. Excuse me. But Marie Birdland is the largest no man's land on the face of the earth. I mean, this is like uninhabitable Antarctic tundra, and so he named it after his wife Marie, and this is like, it was so inhospitable that nobody was able to camp there or do anything, and so they set up camp on the Ross Shelf, and that's where Little America 1, 2, and 3 were. And so I'm not sure what Byrd was thinking, It's like, hey, honey, I'm back from the Antarctic again, and I found the biggest uninhabitable, inhospitable place on the face of the earth and no one wants to go, and I named it after you.
Maybe
what the heck is it?
Maybe naming it after her made him feel at home down there.
I don't know. It's that, so here we go again with women and Byrd. I just really don't understand.
Well, he did spend a long time away from home, so maybe.
That's very true. But the fact is that his wife supported him and his children adored him. So I haven't come up with any family or marriage problems, right, as far as that goes. So he had this second expedition in 1934, and that was sponsored by the National Geographic Society. But he wasn't getting any more funds than that. I mean, he was even getting small donations, from people, and but the important ones were the corporate donations, and they didn't donate money; they just donated the food, fuel, and supplies. And this Antarctic expedition, 33 to 35. Now that was the year that, in 1934, that he spent the winter down there. And people say that 60 of the 82 members of this expedition were all Freemasons.
Mm-hmm. I've read that. Yep.
So I thought, well, that's interesting, And they say that in February 35, Byrd established this first Antarctic Lodge number 777 of New Zealand Constitution. Now, I haven't been able to find out what that means, but I know that the number 777 refers to perfection.
Yep.
And it's significant in numerous religious and political contexts. I haven't found anything about the lodge itself. But Byrd didn't spend the winter at the lodge. I mean, he was in a remote shack at a weather station sucking carbon monoxide fumes. I don't understand.
I've read those too, and I didn't really understand the New Zealand. What is that? Do you have any idea what that has to do with that? I know now they take off from New Zealand, right, to go there, I believe, but
yeah. That's I just don't understand the number 777. I can I can understand that, but this New Zealand Constitution, I didn't find what the hell that means or why Byrd would even be connected to a New Zealand lodge with a constitution in the Antarctic, which, I don't even think it was actually even a building. I think it was some kind of figurative thing.
That's what I thought too, because I had read that during one of his flights earlier, he had also, there was a thing that I had read that he had a Masonic flag. And this is really what this is, that he had done this over the North Pole as well. They had dropped that flag down, or I guess threw in the ocean up there, but But he
Right.
dropped this flag somewhere, and I guess that was the lodge, like some kind of conquering or some kind of, here we are. We've put our foot here.
Yeah. I think it was just symbolic. I mean,
Yeah.
he dropped he dropped the American flag. He dropped he later when he flew over the South Pole, dropped a whole bunch of flags. Every country that was supposedly signed on to the League of Nations or the United Nations, he dropped all those flags too.
Oh, interesting.
So,
okay.
yeah.
I stopped. I just wanted to hear about the Masonic piece.
and of course the pilot that had died in that crash before the cross Atlantic flight he died in a crash. He took a rock from that guy's gravesite and put a Masonic flag and an American flag attached to this rock and dropped it. So there's a lot of symbology and a lot of personal stuff going on with Byrd. You know, that's just the way he was. So he had this Antarctic service expedition, which would have been the third for Byrd, and it was the first one financed by the United States government. So, the ones before he had private funding, whatever funding he could possibly get. But like I said, in March 1940, Byrd was recalled to active duty because of the war in the Office of Chief of Naval Operations, and the expedition continued on to Antarctica without him, so he wasn't even there for the third expedition. And there's like I said, there's a little confusion with these Masonic lodges in Byrd. You mentioned like Washington Federal Lodge Number 1.
Yeah, I'd seen that somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also known as the George Washington Lodge in D.C. It's like one of the oldest ones there. It's named after George Washington. But there's some confusion here because that's not the same lodge as the notorious, what they call the Grand Masonic Lodge that you see in these videos that has the sphinxes out in front of it,
Oh, really? Okay. Okay, that's interesting.
They're not the same ones.
Okay.
And if you look on my blog, I posted photographs of both of those.
Oh.
And they're not the same lodge at all.
Interesting.
And the thing that I discovered with this Masonic thing is that there are all kinds of types of Masonic lodges. There are subgroups of Masons that have their own lodges. And proof of that is this. He was also a member of the National Sojourners, which has a lodge. And those guys were all Freemasons and Patriots that had served or were serving in the United States Armed Forces. So this is another subgroup,
Interesting.
And these are organized, and they meet in chapters, and it's like all kinds of stuff. You got the Shriners; they got their stuff too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
yeah. I've heard of the Sojourners. I didn't realize that they were related to the Masons, though. That's an interesting piece of information.
Yeah, but the thing was that particular group was restricted, so to speak, in that they were all that they'd all served in the armed forces. So it's like a fraternal community thing. I don't think there's anything occultish or whatever. I mean, you could get into that with the Kabbalah and the Jewish mysticism and all that. But I don't think Byrd really had the time to get into that stuff, to tell you the truth, I mean, the Sojourners group included youth and leadership programs. They sponsor ROTC and junior ROTC, and of course, I said this number 777. It's said to represent perfection in Jewish Kabbalah and Gematria, and you got to look at it. Even Aleister Crowley wrote a book about it, and he even titled the book 777 and Other Kabbalistic Writings.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of that before.
There's a collection of papers written by Aleister Crowley, and it's like a reference book, and it's based on the Hermetic Kabbalah, which is the Western Kabbalah.
Yep.
It's not entirely Jewish. It's But even Steve Quill has an email address that ends with 777.
That's so funny you mentioned that. I used to use an email address that was 777, and I didn't know I think Barb asked me about that. She goes,
Yeah.
"Is that?" I thought I was involved in his organization, but honestly, when I made the 777, like I went through 3 or 4 other numbers and it had rejected them, and I think I just plugged that in, and I stopped using it because of that. Though after I heard the story behind that.
Yeah. So I had a question about these top secret Nazi maps that were associated with the New Schwabenland thing and whatever of those having their secret base up there, right? And I found an article, 1988, that was in the National Examiner. And this was an interview with Ernst Zundel, but the publisher or the interviewer was using the pen name Christoph Friedrich, but it was Ernst Zundel, and he was interviewing this guy, and he did this big article. And these maps appeared. A couple of them appeared in that article, and they were later used by members of the Vril Society. If you know what the Vril Society is.
Yes, I've heard of that. Right, that's they're are they the conspiracy theorist people? Like,
yes, you have they're older than the Tool Society. You've heard the Tool Society, right?
No, I don't know that one. That's a new
the Nazi Tool, THULE.
Oh yeah, okay,
Society.
Yeah.
Okay, now the Vril Society is older. And these guys they're like the neo-Nazi Hollow Earthers. That's the Vril Society, right? Then you had the Tool Society, which the Nazis were most familiarized with, right?
Yeah.
So Zundel was a member of the Vril Society, and if you compare the maps that were created for the 1938-39 expedition that I mentioned, the actual German maps. It shows that Zundel probably altered portions of those in his book, Germany's Antarctic Claim, Secret Nazi Polar Expeditions, 1978. And I've included those at the bottom of my blog, too. And of course, we have the Russians involved with perpetuating them as being authentic. And they're claiming that they were released by, the KGB and that they were top secret, And Steve Quill did a video about all this with these maps, and he read verbatim from this National Examiner article, attributing it to Christoph Friedrich, not Ernst Zundel. And he even agrees, or appears to agree, with what the Vril Society believes, that the Nazis will eventually rule the world. And Quayle spins this eventually to be some kind of biblical prophecy, and that the Nazi Antichrist will emerge from a secret base in Antarctica, and that's clip 2.
Okay, roll it.
So listen to this. I'll finish this up. Writes the researcher, and we're talking about Friedrich. He claims this, and this is astonishing. Did the scientists of Hitler achieve the unbelievable without extraterrestrial forces? Or have extraterrestrials helped technological development? Maybe the people from another galaxy. The aliens helped the Germans possibly because they were at a certain technological development stage. Perhaps they were technologically speaking a similar language. Friedrich believes that Hitler's last battalion will come into action when the world is in deep economic crisis. Wow, was this gentleman, and if someone can email me and tell me if he's alive or not, I would like to interview him. But now let me say this. This is in closing. Friedrich believes that Hitler's last battalion will come into action when the world is deep in an economic crisis. Then space Nazis will occupy strategic points in the world and will rule the world. That was George Glidden. I don't know.
Well, that was a quite interesting take. Even more interesting, Gunnar, is the art that this guy has behind him. I don't know what that's going on there, but
well, that art that's behind him, that is black, white, and purple. Did you see? It's a stylized V, which is the symbol of the Brill Society.
Ah, okay.
And Steve Quayle's portraying it right as he's talking about it. I mean, and actually, Ernst Zundel died in Germany 3 months after Quayle posted that video.
Wow.
And Quayle incorrectly refers to before sometime in the video, is like he said that RD, which is Reich or Imperial Germans, he says that this was R&D, research and development, and that Jewish prisoners were taken from Dachau down to the secret Antarctic Nazi base. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's obvious Quayle never even researched the origin of this stuff, especially when he's doing a video with the Brill Society logo prominently displayed, and he doesn't even seem to know that Ernst Zundel was actually the researcher that he's talking about,
Wow.
And this Brill Society, like I said, it's older than the Tool Society, and it was inspired by another work of fiction by Edward Bulwer Lytton. It was called The Coming Race, and it was republished as Brill, The Power of the Coming Race. And this started in like 1871, so this has been around for a long time.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. But here we go again. We've got the influence of Zundel, and Zundel had been working off the success of Erich von Daniken's books, in the early 70s, The Chariots of the Gods, and other ufology books, popularizing the idea of that. And then Zundel, who's a Brill Society member and a neo-Nazi, he's claiming that there were secret Nazi expeditions and with these massive convoys, with U-boats and secret weapons in tow. And I mean, the thing is that it's somebody else actually did an investigation. A guy named he's a ufologist. His name is Kevin McClure, and he actually investigated all this. And I found a copy of his investigation, and he concluded that these Nazi UFO myths, it's nothing more than bigoted delusion. He called it.
Huh. So that's always been an interesting twist to this. that some of these guys, like this gentleman, mix the Nazi theories in with UFOs. I just, is you've debunked it here. Some of these facts. So it's still an interesting concept to think about. So many people have bought into it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and then you have the other factor where he's obviously targeting Christians in the manner of somehow working this into a biblical prophecy.
Right.
But I mean, if any of these Christians found out what Steve Quayle was doing,
yeah,
I mean, he's going to look really bad.
Yeah, and
there's no doubt about that.
And in his little cabal right now that he runs and still runs with, they really kicked that in with the guy from South Carolina, what's his name? Tammy the Baker, Jim Baker. They're all running with that.
Jim Baker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're all in with it, man. Him and Tom Horn and lots of other people. It's I guess it's big money, Mac.
Oh yeah.
It must be.
Yeah, sure it is. Be. Yeah. No doubt about it. You're taking advantage of the desperate, and you're giving them also something that's kind of a sci-fi, entertainment value to this. There is a comic book esque-ness to this that even myself, I get a little interested in it in a way. But it's interesting. Well, yeah, it's entertaining. I mean, there's no doubt about it, and there's a place and a time for that. Yeah, of course there is. I'm not. Yeah. I'm not saying there isn't. And I've read my share of sci-fi, and I enjoy a good mystery movie or something like that. But when you're clearly presenting fiction as fact, that's the problem. Yeah. Agreed. So we got questions about this. A letter from a crewman of U-209, and I found out that
this letter showed up in the mid-1980s. And there are several claims to its origin, including a claim by Colonel Billy Fay Woodard. Now, wouldn't you know, right? Billy Woodard again, right? And, of course, Woodard said that he'd gone to the secret Nazi base and was given a letter to deliver to someone in Argentina. And said, I posted the actual copies of both of these letters, you know. And it starts out like, and there's a dialogue of these guys emailing back and forth to each other, and one of them says that he had in his possession a copy of a letter written in March 1985 from a gentleman named Carl Unger to Mr. Woodard concerning the submarine U-209 commanded by Heinrich Rode. Says the Mr. Woodward that was being referred to in the email found out was retired Colonel Billy Woodard, but the date of this letter, supposedly sent from this secret base, is dated April 20, 1947. Now, do you recognize any significance of that date? It's Adolf Hitler's birthday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I found out that the U-209 was attacked by a British B-17 Flying Fortress number 220 Squadron, Royal Air Force, southeast of Iceland on April 16, 1943, and it sustained damage to her periscope. She was attacked again by a Canadian PBY of number 5 Squadron, Royal Canadian Air Force, on the 4th of May, and the damage incurred was to her radio transmitter and a couple other things, so she couldn't send any messages out. Somehow they got a message to another U-boat, 954, and they said that this is the history of the U-boat itself. They said the U-209 was recalled, but she was never heard from again. And she was attacked again and sunk on the 19th of May by the frigate HMS Jed and the cutter HMS Sennen. But there may have been a mistake because the U-954 that this message was sent to was definitely sunk. So there's a couple of confusion in there. But at any rate, the U-209 was considered sunk with all 46 crew, no survivors. And I've included those links there. It was. So this thing was like sunk off the coast of Iceland, and that's nowhere near Antarctica. Sorry.
Not even as a crow flies.
No. Question was about vessels involved in Operation Highjump being stricken from the record afterward, especially the USS Pine Island, which was one of the seaplane tenders. And I came across these claims that several of these high jump ships were just disappeared, because people claiming they'd been sunk in 1947. And this is totally false, and anyone who has 10 minutes can look this up, because the ship's histories will tell you when they were decommissioned, or if they were recommissioned, or when they were sold for scrap,
Yeah.
And so I got a message from somebody who knew about the USS Pine Island, the seaplane tender, and he said the seaplane tender USS Pine Island in that task force was the ship that my dad served on.
Oh, wow.
Operation Highjump. He said his dad served on it in the mid-1950s. The guy says, I have a 32 by 18 photo of it on the wall in my bedroom.
Oh.
He says my dad, who lived in Seattle, Washington, had served on the Pine in the mid-50s, and he went to the yard where they were scrapping her, and he bought a small ship's bell and some bronze plaques. And he said that his bathroom door even had a bronze plaque over it pronouncing it the officer's head.
That's a huge ship. I mean, that thing's got some
big
horsepower, man.
Oh, yeah.
Sheesh.
Yeah, that's a lot of steel.
Yeah.
A lot of steel.
I mean, to hold that plane like the picture that you have there, I mean,
yeah, three of them. Yeah.
That's insane. How does that thing keep from tipping over? It's just, that's crazy engineering, man.
but that ship had served throughout the Korean War and Vietnam. I guess what was the exact date that it got scrapped? But look, you can go right on the internet and type in USS Pine Island, and you can see the date when it was scrapped. You know.
Yeah.
It's not that it was stricken from the record and disappeared all of a sudden in 47 or 55, because here we have the testimony of someone whose father served on it in the mid 50s in the Navy, you know. So, and I had a question about the use of jet assisted takeoff. Now, you're going to love this, Mac. And they said, was Highjump the first operational use of jet assisted takeoff? And I'm going to have to say probably not. Because in the early 1939, the National Academy of Sciences, the U.S., gave a rocket research group $1,000. This group included Jack Parsons, Frank Molina, Edward Foreman, and Apollo M.O. Smith at the Guggenheim Aeronautical Laboratory at the California Institute of Technology. And what they wanted them to do is research this rocket-assisted takeoff of aircraft. Now, the Germans had been playing with this since the mid to late 20s. And so this was our guys. These weren't Germans, right? Secret Germans. And, you know, in 1939 in the United States, these were our guys, you know, at the California Institute of Technology. And this JTOL research was the first rocket research to receive financial assistance from the U.S. government since World War I, when Robert H. Goddard, you might find that name familiar, he had the contract to develop solid fuel rocket weapons. So in late 1941, this guy started, this team attached these 50-pound solid fuel Aerojet devices, and they tested them. And on the first run, they tested this thing, and then it says on the last run they actually removed the propeller from the aircraft. They attached 6 of these JTOL units under the wings, and the pilot was thrust in the air for a short flight. And so this guy became the first American to fly by rocket power. You know, just rocket power only.
Wow.
And so this JTOL was actually tested on, and this is important. This date's important. It was tested in April 1942, and after that was used on our bomber aircraft during the war. And the date's important because the Doolittle raid was in April 1942.
Okay, yeah, right.
And so as Doolittle is doing his thing, J2 is actually being tested for the first time. And to be honest, I don't think that if Doolittle had that technology, that it would have made any difference. Because if you know anything about the raid, they thought that the Japanese had discovered him because, you know, and they launched early, 600 miles early. And so this was really taxing their operational range, and a lot of them went down in China as a result. But, you know, I don't think, even if they'd had JTOL, you know, I really don't think it would have helped Doolittle one bit. You know, his fate was pretty much sealed.
Yeah, right.
But here, I found a clip of the first JTOL test in April 1942, and that's clip 3.
Here we go. Oh, wow. So early jet-assisted takeoff was we roll that back just 1 second. So was a rocket, I want to see that quote on there. It was actually a rocket motor test.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah, they used to call it rocket-assisted takeoff, RATO. So this was like, you know, RATO.
Interesting. Okay, I was trying to reconcile that there.
Right.
So that shows them actually setting this thing off on the ground. The Army Air Corps needed JTOL to help the heavy bombers take off from short runways, of course. A bunch of smart-looking gentlemen standing around
scientist and I'm the Air Corps pilot.
Yeah. First JTOW test, Marchfield, California, August 1941.
Yep.
And so I wonder what in this first takeoff, there was like a chase plane behind them. I wonder what the situation was with that. I mean, was it just a?
I'm not sure. It may have been just a chase plane.
Yeah.
I mean, just to be with him in case something happened, and he could guide him back down. They could have been filming it. They could have had an aircraft next to him in the air filming him.
Yep.
I'm just not sure.
Yeah. Okay. It's very interesting that the way this is falling out here. So I mean, they are definitely JTOW test team. It shows all the gentlemen there standing, which next to a pretty high tech looking plane for the time, actually. And then they're showing the bomber here, them climbing in there.
Yeah.
And boy, he's setting the specs on those bolts on that thing pretty tight.
He's got the torque wrench there. He's putting that on there.
And now that you can see this this thing, man, has got some burners to it. Wow.
Yeah.
It looks like an F-15 from behind. I mean, who would have thought,
It does.
And wow. So, that's very interesting. You think about this in full context, Gunner, of 1939, we're saying was the first test of this. And we had just, it had been such a short period of time since the Wright brothers. And all of a sudden we had moved to this. And how long have we been now without some kind of advancement like this? I mean, certainly we have them, they're out there. It just doesn't seem like we have made that big of a jump of transition, since this particular time when these guys were doing that. And this is kind of offbeat, but these guys standing around shooting this off reminds me of that guy who tried to launch himself into space the other day to look at the flat Earth, which is very appropriate.
The flat Earther guy, yeah. That's incredible, isn't it?
It is. It took some balls to do that. It really did. I mean, to shoot yourself in this plane because the lack of control. This plane is meant to fly under the stress of a propeller, a prop. And it just wasn't meant to take this kind of force. And I'm sure squirrely was beyond the adjective that you could use probably to fly this thing.
Yeah. And another thing about JTOW that I found out, Mac, is that there's a lot of forces that are made on the aircraft frame itself. When you start attaching rocket motors, solid fuel rockets to these things, it creates a lot of pressures on the airframes, and that has to be designed and anticipated and corrected for. And the other thing is that it's extremely expensive to use those things.
Well, and the third thing that I see, and I have limited experience of this when I was a child. I tried to build a rocket one time with multiple of those little rocket engines. And the synchronicity of setting multiple of these off at the same time precisely, which is very important. I learned the hard way. would be a very important thing, especially if you're the pilot.
Absolutely. Let's see. Next question is about flights over the Antarctic. Are flights over the Antarctic, or are they banned? Is it a no-fly zone? What the hell is going on?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Well, I found out that it is not a no-fly zone. And the big situation with that is, how are you going to enforce that if it's a no-fly zone? How are you going to enforce a no-fly zone over Antarctica?
Well, aliens do it, right?
Well, I don't know. Maybe they hit a couple of F-16s down there and at the snow base down there, and they just got them on call,
right.
down there. I don't know. Like, no, there's no no-fly zone that's been legally or otherwise set up for Antarctica. And there are no scheduled commercial flights that fly over the South Pole normally. I mean, it's just not a route which they would take generally.
Yeah.
And earlier, as I mentioned, when you had analog systems for navigation and stuff like that, the magnetic situation down there would screw with their instruments, and you've got the fuel issue at some altitudes with the earlier planes that it was so cold that the jet fuel, regular aviation fuel would actually freeze, right? With these prop planes, and then of course you had the early jets. I mean, and I mean even jet fuel will freeze at a certain point. It just became a safety issue, and I'll tell you why here, because these commercial flights, there's no law that says that aircraft can't fly over the South Pole. The aircraft can fly over the North Pole. And I found out they call it Santa's shortcut.
Ah, okay.
to fly over the North Pole, right? That's to get to, yeah. So they do that all the time, but they do it because there are most of the time, 80% of the time, they're actually over land, and they're within 3 hours of flight from an airfield somewhere. But that's not the case in the South Atlantic and in the Antarctic. I mean, it's just the territory, the size of the territory is just so vast.
Right.
And these commercial flights that even fly over there, I mean, they do have flights where, like I say, if you're going from South America, from Brazil or something like that, or Chile, and you're going, let's say, to Australia or New Zealand, those aircraft actually do fly over the Antarctic. But as far and some are even chartered, these chartered flights. But what they do is on those chartered flights, these airlines require these commercial flights to have to be prepared for these extended range operations, and they have to be certified when they're flying south of a latitude of 72 degrees, and they require them to carry all this special survival equipment, which means, depending on the aircraft, they have to remove, seats and all the rest of this stuff to carry all this emergency gear, and remove seats that would, be paying customers. And so it's an economic decision as well, for these airlines.
Right. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. And the other reason is that in 1979, they actually had an aircraft go down, New Zealand Airlines DC-10, and it had navigation problems. You had 257 passengers and crew aboard, and they were attempting to land at McMurray Station down there. They had their navigation charts and stuff like that had been adjusted at the last minute, and were not sent to these pilots who were in the air, and they had come down to a low altitude and actually flew into a mountain. They were flying into a mountain they were about 1,500 feet, and they flew into this mountain, which is 12,000 feet high.
Yeah, I think that's something that's missed on a lot of people is the size of the mountains down there. I mean, they have mountain ranges. Alaska can claim this too, but they have mountains that rival Everest. Just as far as you can see. And it was recent.
Incredible.
Yeah, it is. And I was watching this show the other day. Some guys were doing an outside, they were going on this expedition. They were scientists, but they were also kind of adventurers. And I don't remember exactly what their intent was to do, but they were leaving from New Zealand, and I'm assuming that it was a U.S. plane. I don't know this for a fact, but they had actually loaded all their equipment on this plane 3 days in a row, and the weather is so bad around there where they have to land, and it's an icy, snowy looking runway. It's not like a tarmac. And they had aborted this thing like 3 days in a row. It was almost like watching NASA try to shoot a rocket into space. They get ready and they sit there and they sit there, and then finally the pilot makes the call. No go. So it's not a joke to be flying around Antarctica. It is serious business.
Yeah, it is. It really is. And this wasn't a question, but I'd come across somebody making a comment. And I think it was on a video that I had seen during my research. And this was the case of the mysterious death of Admiral Byrd's son. And this was in October 28, 1988. It says, I found an article that says that Alzheimer's was blamed in the death of Admiral Richard Byrd's son. It says the state medical examiner ruled that Alzheimer's disease contributed to the death of Richard E. Byrd, Jr., 68, son of famed polar explorer Admiral Richard E. Byrd. He said the younger Byrd's body was found on October 3rd in a Hampton, Maryland warehouse, and he'd been missing for 3 weeks after boarding a train in Boston for a trip to Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Chief Medical Examiner John Smeliak said that an autopsy had shown that Byrd died of malnutrition and dehydration, contributed to by an underlying degenerative brain disease, Alzheimer's. And he goes on to explain also Alzheimer's and stuff like that. It said that Byrd's family hadn't even suspected that he had Alzheimer's, and that he'd been dead for several days when his body was found in the warehouse. He says his wallet, luggage, other personal property were missing. Of course, that was probably on the train.
Yeah.
So, he was identified through a Boston Transit Authority card that was found pinned to his undershorts. Yeah, I mean, and what he was doing is he was leaving. He left Boston on September 13th, 88, on the Amtrak train to attend ceremonies the next day at the National Geographic Society in Washington to honor his father, who, of course, flew over the North Pole in 26, and somehow he just never showed up. And on September 15th, a couple of days later, his family filed a missing persons report. And but I don't think there was any conspiracy involved in that.
That was going to be my question. Was there some kind of claim that there was something odd going on with this? And well, there was in the video. There was in the video that the claim was that well, I would say goes that far. I would say that the suggestion has been made that because the death was mysterious, that there may have been connection to his father having been murdered, which is not true. Okay.
So you see where the conspiracy theory continues to go here. So
just a question, a follow up, kind of in the same realm, and just you spurned my thought here, and you may or may not know the answer to this. When you've done a lot of research, you probably at least run across something you can formulate an answer. But speaking of the children, was there any money Byrd ever did he gain any wealth from all these adventures on speaking tour, or something like that, books? I mean, was there any money that he ever made off this?
I in my research, I have not come across anything like that.
Interesting.
I mean, he obviously wrote books. He wrote articles for National Geographic. I really haven't found anything that details his personal wealth. Of course, he came from a wealthy blue blood family. I think one of his relatives was actually a congressman or senator, Byrd.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, he was obviously already from a wealthy family. I'm going to tell you the truth, Mac. He probably was wealthy initially.
Was Byrd the same Byrd that was up in Virginia that everybody talks about supporting Hillary Clinton? Was that the same Byrd?
I believe so. Yeah, I'd have to double check.
Yeah, that just came to my mind. That's interesting. the guy who was in the KKK or something. They always I don't know the facts on there, but that's interesting. Huh.
Maybe not that Byrd, but like I said, I have to double check that. But he did have a relative who was a congressman or senator.
Yeah, okay,
most definitely
interesting. Yeah,
and his family was known to have been wealthy, and of course he had all these wealthy connections. And like I said, I've seen a video of one of his daughters. The son that died mysteriously was his only son, and he had 3 daughters. So. But I'm not aware of any family problems or anything like that. That's kind of mysterious too, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I haven't found anything about his personal wealth or anything.
Well,
like that.
I would imagine, with his time of service, he probably had after the war, World War II, he probably had a pretty good pension, I would imagine, with his rank and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. A pension at the rank of Rear Admiral. So,
Yeah.
That's pretty good in and of itself, I'd say.
I would too.
Yeah.
Well,
So that's pretty much it for what I've got. Like I said, I was really surprised that I had any response whatsoever.
Well, I'm not, Gunner. This has been a really good presentation. I think tonight's been as interesting as any of them. I've really enjoyed this particular answering the questions because some of these I had in my own mind as well. You've also got your blog out there if anybody wants to touch on these, and you've documented this, footnoted. This is a really professional job. This isn't something that you just whipped together for sure. You spent hours, right. I'm certain, on this, and I wouldn't even want to ask you because I would feel bad that you did all this work because I'm certain that was a lot of work. And you've also got some YouTube videos out there too. You posted those as well. I sadly I haven't got a chance to look at them yet, and I know that we've had some issues with the music, and I tried to fix that for you tonight before the thing, so you don't have to do too much work because I know certainly what that's like. But
right, those videos, segments 1 and 2. I've posted those videos on my YouTube channel. That is Gunner65.
Gunner65 for the YouTube videos for sure. That's if you want to.
And I've also posted them in the chat if anyone wants to scroll up and find them. They're there, and I'm going to be working on the next 2, and I'll post those as well.
Well, what do you got? I don't want to sound like I'm asking you to do more work, but what do you got for us in the future, Gunner? What's your next project?
Since we're working on this Antarctic theme, I had discovered the story of the first woman to set foot in Antarctica, the first American woman. And so I've already done the research on that. If you want me to present that for you.
Man, that sounds interesting. Yes, sir.
I think if we have any women out there, they might enjoy that.
We've got a few around. They straggle around somewhere.
Otherwise, after that, it's up to you what you want to do. If you have anyone that has any suggestions for me, it'll be a little bit of work and time for me to get these 2 YouTube videos done.
Yeah.
About for the 2 final segments. But yeah, I'm willing to do whatever people might suggest.
Yeah, we'll throw that out there. Maybe somebody on chat will have something. Give us some ideas. I've certainly got a couple. I've told you about one already.
Right.
And we'll look into that too. Maybe we got the wide open field, man. We've got a clean slate here. We're like artists, just painting a beautiful picture as we go along.
Okay.
All right, Gunner. Thank you, buddy. Have a great night. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks, Matt. Good night.
Good night. All right, there goes Gunner. Seriously, it's a fantastic presentation here on Operation Highjump as we look into this and I will say debunk in a way. She-Beast, are you with us still?
Yes.
It was kind of a debunking of some of these theories, the flat earth, the hollow earth. There's been so many people over the years that use these things, like we mentioned, to profit because people are interested in this kind of thing. There was a huge conspiracy. I hate to use that term a lot of the time because it's so derogatory, but there was a huge uptick, I would say, in the 90s. Not that it didn't exist before then, but I think it kind of coincided with the X-Files, right?
Yeah.
And people got into this stuff. Art Bell really kicked off about that time. Not that he wasn't around before that. Not that there weren't other people doing things as well. There have been, but it really got some teeth and took off. And then you had Alex Jones kind of came along in the late 90s, though regional at that time. He eventually took off a bit with some of this kind of stuff. He would entertain some of the individuals and give them more of a platform. And it's now with the internet, it's become, it's a hodgepodge. I've talked to a lot of these people. I've interviewed a lot of these guys and entertained their stories. And I don't mind that if they truly believe it, that's good. A lot of it I think is interesting. I think what Gunner's presented here is it's impossible probably to look at this and say, well, that's not true, because he gives you the source typically from the source, the original source, not that,
not Wikipedia,
not that the alien told me that this happened. As great as that sounds, and as much as I like to entertain the thoughts of that happening, that's a hard, in your rational mind, it's really hard to say, that's cool, dude. That's cool. But when you've got these sources that Gunner has put together here, and in RK Cole Jr. blogspot.com, you can go out there and read the papers that he's written here and look at the sources. And it's fascinating. It really is. I think the adventurous spirit of Byrd and the other guys and all the other work that came into this, is something to behold. We don't have, I guess still
it's lost.
I think even today going to Antarctica isn't something that's just, it's not something a lot of people do, and it's still an adventure. It's been,
I would love to do
other than the bottom of the ocean, it's still one of the last, I guess you could say parts of Alaska as well, is a real adventurous place, to go and do all these things. And it's really fascinating that people are down there still doing studies. And if it's nothing there and it's so barren, why are they always down there studying things, And I guess that throws it into a little bit of conspiratorial mindset again, but it is a fascinating place. And it's interesting that Rockefeller and Ford and, what were they looking for? Why were they interested? Even though they were, philanthropic guys, they giving money to do this. Who knows, what the end results, what they were looking for. Maybe they were looking for, something, who knows? I guess we don't know that for sure. Was it just for the adventure? Mankind has been these guys were adventurous. You strap jet packs, rocket packs, whatever they were, onto a fucking prop plane and you shoot the son of a bitch off. You got some damn balls, man. You really do. And, certainly appreciate Gunner's hard work on this. It's been a fun 4 weeks, man. That's kind of it's kind of strange to see it come to an end here at the 4-week mark. But one thing I always found interesting, I mentioned this the other day. I'm gonna take a little break here and use the bathroom. But one of the when we started talking about this a bit ago, I saw this I don't know, when did we watch this? This is an old video, but yeah. I hadn't seen it till like sometime last year. And it's called, anybody listens to the show, I use a lot of Metallica and the bumper music in the beginning of the show especially, but this is Metallica Freeze 'Em All. And Metallica, is a heavy metal band, I would imagine, what they're classified as. But they had played on every continent, and their goal was to play, they had played in every continent except Antarctica, and they had wanted to do that. So they went down there, set up their kit and put this like solar panel dome, geodesic dome up, and all the scientists join in here. And it really is, are you tired? It really is pretty damn cool to see this particular concert in Antarctica. Metallica Antarctica Freeze 'Em All.